Welcome to your personalized deep dive. We've got a ton of fascinating insights and analysis to unpack today.
Yeah.
All centered around this potential big deal
Right.
being discussed between the U.S. and Russia amidst the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that it's not just about these two superpowers.
Right.
We're seeing the EU, China, India, even North Korea mentioned in the mix.
Yeah. The potential deal is really reframing the narrative.
Yeah.
It's less about who's winning on the battlefield
Right.
and more about a complex geopolitical chess game
Yeah.
with long-term consequences for everyone involved.
It's like the world is holding its breath,
Mm-hmm.
waiting to see how the pieces will fall.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into the source material you've shared. What's really caught your eye?
Multiple sources, including that in-depth YouTube analysis you sent,
Yeah.
suggest that back-channel negotiations between the U.S. and Russia might already be underway. What's particularly intriguing is the possibility that these talks are happening without direct involvement from the EU and Ukraine.
That's a bold move.
Mm-hmm.
What could be driving this decision to potentially sideline key players like the EU and Ukraine?
Well, the analysis indicates that the Biden administration might be feeling the heat from Republicans who are pushing for a swift resolution to the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
With the U.S. elections looming on the horizon,
Yeah.
there's a sense of urgency to contain the situation before it escalates further
Right.
or becomes a major campaign issue.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But wouldn't excluding the EU and Ukraine from these talks
Right.
alienate them and potentially damage those relationships?
It's a delicate balancing act.
Right.
The sources highlight growing concerns in Washington about the economic and social fallout in Europe, particularly in key countries like Germany and France.
Right.
They're facing their own internal struggles.
Right.
And the analysis suggests there's a fear that prolonged conflict could further destabilize the region.
The sources do paint a rather bleak picture of a disillusioned Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We see reports of Germany's industrial giants,
Right.
like Audi and Mercedes,
Yeah.
grappling with economic challenges.
Yeah.
And in France, there's a noticeable rise in support for Marine Le Pen.
Great.
It seems the economic ramifications of the conflict are hitting hard,
Yeah.
and that could be impacting their stance on continued support for Ukraine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this economic vulnerability, coupled with Europe's dependence on Russian energy,
Yeah,
adds another layer of complexity.
right.
The sources suggest that the U.S. might be trying to navigate this delicate situation by taking a more direct approach with Russia,
Okay.
potentially aiming for a quicker resolution that could alleviate some of the pressure on their European allies.
Well, what about Russia?
Mm-hmm.
What's their perspective in all of this?
Right.
Are they genuinely open to a negotiated settlement?
Yeah.
Or are they just exploiting the situation to their advantage?
Well, the source doesn't explicitly reveal Putin's endgame.
Right.
We can try to decipher his potential objectives based on his past actions and rhetoric.
Okay.
The report indicates that he's likely looking to secure a favorable outcome,
Mm-hmm.
especially now that he perceives the West as divided and facing internal challenges.
Yeah.
He might not want a protracted war,
Right.
but he's also unlikely to back down from what he considers Russia's core interests.
So there's a possibility he's using this opportunity to solidify his position
Yeah.
and potentially achieve some strategic gains,
Mm-hmm.
even if it means bypassing the EU and Ukraine in the process.
Right.
It's a high-stakes gamble.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And adding another layer of intrigue is the recurring mention of Donald Trump in the materials you provided.
Oh, yeah.
It seems he's positioning himself as a potential deal maker in this scenario.
Right. The report highlights Trump's repeated claims that he could swiftly end the conflict, even hinting at a possible summit with Putin.
Right.
It definitely echoes his past foreign policy approach,
Yeah.
which often prioritized personal relationships and transactional deals.
Mm-hmm.
But how is his potential involvement being perceived by the current administration and the international community?
The sources reveal a mixture of skepticism and concern.
Okay.
Some view Trump's involvement as potentially destabilizing,
Yeah.
given his unpredictable nature and his previous criticism of NATO.
Right.
Others see a sliver of hope in his willingness to engage with Putin.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of caution surrounding his motives and potential methods.
It's certainly a wild card in an already volatile situation.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And speaking of volatile, let's shift our focus to the EU's perspective,
Okay.
as we've touched upon.
Yeah.
The sources paint a picture of a disillusioned Europe struggling with economic hardship and internal divisions.
Mhm.
There's a growing sense that their influence,
Right.
both in Washington and Moscow,
Yeah.
is waning.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
One of the reports even mentions a potential leadership change in Poland that could further strain relations with Ukraine.
Right.
They cite historical tensions and differing views on the conflict,
Yeah.
which adds another layer of complexity to an already fragile situation.
Yeah.
If the EU's influence is diminishing, and the U.S. seems to be exploring alternative paths to resolution,
Right.
where does that leave Zelenskyy and Ukraine?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The sources portray Zelenskyy as increasingly isolated, facing a series of tough choices with potentially devastating consequences.
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the reports claims that Zelenskyy privately admitted to Macron his willingness to negotiate with Putin and end the conflict.
Wow.
But publicly, he maintains a very different stance.
Yes, and this apparent discrepancy highlights the immense pressure he's under.
Yeah.
He's trying to project strength and unity for his people,
Right.
while also grappling with the reality of a potentially unwinnable war. He's caught in a difficult position, navigating a complex web of internal and external pressures.
So what are his options?
Right.
What can he realistically do in this situation?
Yeah.
It seems like he's trapped between a rock and a hard place.
He could choose to continue fighting, hoping for a breakthrough on the battlefield or a surge in Western support.
Yeah.
However, this strategy carries the risk of further escalation,
Right.
potentially leading to even greater losses for Ukraine.
Yeah.
Alternatively, he could consider accepting a deal that might involve territorial concessions, but that would be seen by many as a betrayal, potentially undermining his legitimacy both domestically and internationally.
It's a no-win situation.
It is.
And the source suggests that his predicament is further compounded by the upcoming elections in Ukraine.
Right.
The potential loss of power adds another layer of pressure to his decision-making process.
Exactly.
And then there's the North Korea wild card,
Oh, yeah.
right? The involvement of North Korean troops in the conflict.
Wow.
What's your take on this unexpected development?
It's a fascinating twist.
Yeah.
The sources indicate that the presence of North Korean troops has rattled Western leaders, raising concerns about the potential for further escalation.
Yeah.
North Korea's military capabilities are often underestimated,
Right.
but they possess a large and ideologically driven army that could significantly alter the dynamics on the ground.
It's a stark reminder that this conflict extends far beyond Ukraine's borders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It highlights the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that are shaping the course of events. We're not just dealing with a regional conflict.
Right.
This situation has the potential to redraw the global geopolitical map. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like we're watching a geopolitical thriller unfold in real time
Yeah.
with new plot twists emerging every day.
It really is.
But amidst all the strategic maneuvering and political calculations, it's easy to lose sight of the human cost of this conflict.
You're absolutely right. One of the sources mentions a recommendation from the U.S. for Ukraine to lower the military recruitment age to 18.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder of the devastating toll this war is taking on the younger generation.
Yeah.
And it raises serious ethical concerns.
It's heartbreaking to imagine young people
It is.
being thrust into such a dangerous and traumatic situation.
Indeed. The analysis also delves into the psychological impact on soldiers, the moral dilemmas they face,
Right?
and the growing sense of disillusionment among the population.
Yeah.
It paints a very different picture from the often heroic narratives we see in mainstream media.
It's a crucial reminder that there are multiple perspectives on this conflict, each with its own validity and complexities.
Right.
The source highlights the deep divisions within Ukrainian society itself,
Yeah.
with some advocating for continued resistance at all costs,
Right.
while others yearn for peace, even if it comes at a high price.
Exactly. And one particularly disturbing incident mentioned in the source underscores the brutal reality of war and the potential for atrocities.
Right.
There's a description of a video circulating online allegedly showing Ukrainian soldiers killing an elderly woman.
Oh, wow.
While the authenticity of the video is debated, it highlights the dehumanizing nature of conflict and the potential for violence to spiral out of control, regardless of which side is responsible.
It's a stark reminder that war ultimately dehumanizes everyone involved.
It does. And it emphasizes the urgent need for a peaceful resolution.
Yeah.
even if it involves difficult compromises.
Right.
The analysis suggests that a potential deal might involve Ukraine accepting some form of neutrality,
Okay.
possibly with security guarantees from major powers.
But would that be enough to satisfy Putin?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The source indicates that his ultimate goals remain somewhat ambiguous.
Right.
Would he truly settle for anything less than complete control over Ukraine?
That's the million-dollar question. Some analysts believe he's aiming for regime change in Kyiv and the installation of a pro-Russian government, effectively bringing Ukraine back into Moscow's sphere of influence.
Right.
Others argue that his primary focus is on securing Russia's strategic interests,
Okay.
which might include control over key territories like the Donbas region,
Yeah.
and preventing Ukraine from ever joining NATO.
So it's possible he's playing a long game, using this conflict to weaken Ukraine
Yeah.
and assert Russia's dominance in the region.
That's certainly one plausible interpretation.
Right.
And this uncertainty about Putin's true intentions adds another layer of complexity to the negotiations.
It does.
So if this big deal does materialize,
Yeah.
what could it realistically look like?
That's what I'm eager to understand. What
Yeah.
are the most likely scenarios
Right.
based on what we've gathered from these sources?
Based on the analysis,
Okay.
there are a few possibilities.
Okay.
First, we could see a ceasefire agreement as a starting point. This would provide much-needed relief for the people of Ukraine
Right.
and create an opportunity for further negotiations towards a more permanent settlement.
That sounds like a crucial first step,
Yeah,
but it doesn't address the underlying issues that led to the conflict.
right.
What else might be on the table?
Second, there could be some form of territorial concessions by Ukraine.
Okay.
This likely involves the eastern regions that Russia currently occupies.
Right.
However, it's a highly contentious issue,
Yeah.
and it's unclear if Zelenskyy would be willing or politically able to make such concessions.
Yeah. Ceding territory would be a tough pill to swallow for Ukraine,
It would be.
especially after enduring so much hardship and loss. It could also set a dangerous precedent for future conflicts.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the third possibility?
The third scenario involves a commitment from Ukraine to remain neutral,
Okay.
meaning it wouldn't join NATO or any other military alliance perceived as a threat by Russia.
Mhm.
This could be a major concession that might satisfy Putin's security concerns.
Right.
However, it would raise serious questions about Ukraine's long-term security and sovereignty,
Yeah.
leaving them vulnerable to potential future aggression.
It seems like a precarious balancing act,
It is.
trying to appease Russia's security concerns
Yeah,
without compromising Ukraine's right to self-determination.
right.
What about the other players in this geopolitical chess game? What are the U.S. and Russia likely to gain from this potential deal?
For the U.S., a successful deal could achieve the immediate goal of containing the conflict
Okay.
and preventing further escalation.
Right.
It would also align with their desire to avoid a direct military confrontation with Russia.
Mhm.
The analysis also suggests that securing the release of American citizens currently held by Russia
Yeah.
could be part of the negotiations.
And for Putin, what's his likely endgame?
Putin's potential gains are multifaceted.
Right.
The analysis highlights that he could secure formal recognition of Russia's control over Crimea,
Right.
which they annexed in 2014, and potentially gain additional territory in eastern Ukraine.
Okay.
A deal could also serve to weaken NATO
Right.
and reinforce Russia's influence in the region,
Mm.
projecting an image of strength and assertiveness on the global stage.
So it seems everyone involved stands to gain something from this deal,
Yeah,
but it also comes at a significant cost.
that's the nature of compromise.
Right.
It rarely leaves all parties completely satisfied,
Yeah.
and there are often unintended consequences.
Right.
It's important to weigh the potential benefits against the potential risks
Hmm.
and to consider the long-term implications for all involved.
This entire situation feels incredibly fragile,
It does.
like a house of cards that could collapse at any moment.
Yeah.
What are some factors that could derail this big deal?
Several factors could throw a wrench in the works.
Okay.
Hardliners on both sides.
Right.
Those who are ideologically opposed to any form of compromise
Mhm.
could actively try to sabotage the negotiation, either through military actions or political maneuvering.
Right.
Public opinion in Ukraine or the U.S. could turn against the deal,
Hmm.
making it politically untenable for the leaders involved.
Right.
And then there's always the potential for unforeseen events.
Yeah.
a sudden escalation of the conflict,
Right.
a shift in global power dynamics, or even domestic political upheaval,
Yeah.
any of which could completely upend the delicate balance of this situation.
So even if this deal does miraculously come together,
Yeah.
there's no guarantee it will hold.
Precisely. It's a step in the right direction.
Right.
But it's just one step on a long and unpredictable road.
Yeah.
The future of Ukraine and indeed the global order remains uncertain, with many potential twists and turns ahead.
It's clear that there are a lot of moving pieces in this situation.
Yeah.
And it's hard to predict what the future holds.
Right.
But if this big deal does happen, what are some of the key things you'll be watching for?
First, I'll be paying close attention to the specific terms of the agreement.
Okay.
The details matter.
Yeah.
How will territorial concessions be addressed?
Right.
What kind of security guarantees will be put in place?
Yeah.
And will they be enough to deter future aggression?
Right.
And how will Ukraine's neutrality be defined and maintained?
It's those specifics
Yeah.
that could make or break the agreement.
Yeah, definitely.
What else will you be looking at as this unfolds?
I'll be closely analyzing the reactions from other major players like the EU, China, and NATO.
Okay.
How this deal reshapes the geopolitical landscape depends heavily on their response.
Right.
Will they support it?
Yeah.
Will they try to undermine it?
Right.
Their actions will be crucial in determining the deal's long-term impact.
It's like a Rimmel effect.
Yeah,
This deal could set off a chain reaction across the globe.
it really could.
What else will you be focusing on?
The domestic political situations in both Ukraine and the U.S. will be fascinating to watch.
Okay.
How will this deal play out in the upcoming elections? Yeah.
Will it bolster or weaken the leaders involved?
Mm-hmm.
The political fallout could be significant,
Right.
shaping the future direction of both countries.
The source material also mentions that the U.S. might pressure Ukraine to hold elections soon after the war ends.
Oh.
That seems like a pretty significant move.
It is.
Why do you think they would push for that?
The analysis suggests several strategic objectives at play.
Okay.
First, holding elections could help legitimize the Ukrainian government
Right.
in the eyes of the international community.
Mm-hmm.
It would counter Russian propaganda that portrays the current leadership as illegitimate
Okay.
and reinforce the image of a democratic Ukraine choosing its own destiny.
So it's a way to push back against Russian narratives and bolster Ukraine's standing on the world stage.
Right.
Are there other reasons?
It could also provide an opportunity for a fresh start.
Okay.
New leadership might be more amenable to compromise and reconciliation,
Yeah.
potentially easing the path towards a lasting peace agreement.
Additionally, elections could help stabilize the situation in Ukraine
Okay.
by preventing a power vacuum that could be exploited by external forces.
It sounds like a way to manage the transition to a post-war Ukraine
Yeah,
and try to shape the outcome in a way that favors U.S. interests.
it could be.
But what about the Ukrainian people?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Do they have any say in this?
That's a crucial question,
Yeah,
and one that the sources don't fully address.
right.
There's a risk that the voices of ordinary Ukrainians,
Mhm.
the people most affected by this conflict,
Yeah.
could be sidelined in the pursuit of geopolitical goals.
Right.
Any lasting peace agreement must address the needs and aspirations of the Ukrainian people,
Yeah.
not just the strategic calculations of powerful nations.
It's a reminder that peace isn't just about signing treaties.
Right.
It's about building a future where everyone feels safe and secure.
It is.
The sources also delve into some internal Ukrainian politics,
Yeah.
mentioning that Zelenskyy might face challenges from figures like Zelenskyy and Budanov.
Hmm.
Could they realistically replace him?
It's certainly a possibility.
Okay.
Zelenskyy, the military leader,
Yeah.
has gained significant popularity for his leadership during the war.
Right.
And Budanov, the intelligence chief, is also seen as a rising star.
Okay.
If Zelenskyy's popularity declines,
Yeah.
either due to his handling of the war
Right.
or his willingness to make concessions in a peace deal,
Mhm.
these men could emerge as potential challengers in the political arena.
It seems like Zelenskyy is walking a tightrope,
He is.
trying to balance competing demands
Right.
and maintain his grip on power in a very volatile environment.
Absolutely. It highlights the fragility of political power,
Yeah.
especially in times of war and uncertainty.
Right.
Leaders are often forced to make difficult choices,
Mhm.
and those choices can have lasting consequences for both themselves and their nations.
So stepping back from all the political intrigue and geopolitical maneuvering,
Right.
what does this potential big deal mean for the average person? Why should we care about what happens in this distant conflict?
This conflict has far-reaching implications that extend beyond Ukraine's borders.
Right.
It's already impacting energy prices,
Yeah.
food security, and the global economy. A prolonged war could lead to even more severe consequences,
Right.
potentially triggering a wider conflict
Yeah.
or even a nuclear confrontation.
It's a scary thought.
It is.
The stakes are incredibly high,
They are.
and the choices made now will have a ripple effect across the globe.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a sobering reminder that we live in an interconnected world, and events on one side of the planet can have profound consequences for everyone.
Exactly. And that's why it's crucial to stay informed,
Yeah.
engage in constructive dialogue, and support humanitarian efforts.
Right.
Even seemingly small actions can contribute to a positive outcome.
Yeah.
We're not just passive bystanders.
Right.
We all have a role to play in shaping the future.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It has been.
Thank you for helping me and our listener connect the dots
Yeah.
and make sense of this complex situation.
It's my pleasure. These are important conversations to have.
Yeah.
And the more we understand,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to navigate the challenges ahead.
And for our listener, as you continue to follow this unfolding story, here's something to consider.
Okay.
If this big deal does materialize,
Right.
who stands to benefit the most?
Yeah.
And who might be left behind? And what does this tell us about the current state of global power dynamics?
Good questions.
These are complex questions with no easy answers,
Yeah.
but they're worth pondering as we witness history being made.
Indeed. We're living in a pivotal moment,
Yeah,
and the decisions made in the coming weeks and months will shape the world for years to come.
right.
It's up to each of us to engage with these issues critically and strive for a more peaceful and just future.
Well said. Thanks again for joining me for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.